Welcome to Decentralized On, where lifelong friends Chicago and Disco navigate the ever-evolving crypto landscape. With genuine curiosity and a commitment to nuance as our North Star, we offer clear-eyed exploration. Our goal? To empower listeners with the tools and insights needed to flourish in this decentralized age.
All right, what's up, everybody? Here we go, 12/13/23, and the bull's heating up. It's exciting. Or is it? We're in a little bit of a pullback, but it's still exciting. It still feels bullish to me. Disco is on my right here. Disco, how are you today?
I'm good. I feel bully, but I also feel like FOMO-y and overwhelmed and want to make sure I'm making the right moves. I feel like stakes are high, and this jam that we play for the intro, I keep thinking about it. Like, it's pretty fascinating. I don't know if we've ever really told the story of it, but it's a AI generated project that each of the NFTs have their own unique beats and videos and everything. It's OMG Kirby, so shout to that. But I just think it's getting under my skin. I like it. I'm sitting there doing a little bit of this and kind of wondering where music's going to go moving forward, and there's just a lot to consider these days.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love this song too. So it's a music NFT that we own. It's only fitting to talk about decentralization and Web3 and all the above, and have a Web3 ownership of a token of a song. And it's so mellow. And we chose that on purpose, almost to, we both get excited. We're excitable people, to slow us down, because I think the point of this show is to try and onboard people responsibly and get into crypto, but also sort through all the FUD. Disco had a great idea. He's like, what if we call this show FOMO Filter? We just keep playing around with names of shows, but that's what we are. And not only are we doing it for everybody out there, but we're doing it for ourselves too. And they're still, I've been in this since 2015 and I still get FOMO, and I will say 99% of the time I don't act on it anymore, but sometimes I do. And sometimes I try and take calculated risk, or sometimes I just buy a piece of art that I love and it's just fun, and you got to go for it.
Yeah. I think that, I think the moves you don't make are often the best, but you do have to obviously get involved in the game and figure out how you're going to do things. And I think that one of the things that we're trying to do as a show and as a partnership and everything is really just trying to provide context and tools to help us, kind of navigate, as we say, this space, because it's easy to get your brain hijacked, as we've said almost every week. Yeah. And, the newest news each week, it can really get you thinking about stuff like, hey, buy this altcoin before the ETF announcements and all this. And it's out there. So I want us to kind of be a filter on some of that and help us kind of get back to our anchors and our roots and talk that stuff out.
Yeah, we're definitely playing the long game here. I mean, I always try and think, like, for our kids, what could you get to just be perennially evergreen and, either pass along to them or get that in 20 years, pass some along to them and have that beach house that with all glass on the ocean or lakefront or something, that dream retirement home, on the rocking chair, of course, with a country time lemonade sitting next to your beautiful spouse.
And it tastes like good old-fashioned lemonade, indeed.
Yes, it does indeed. So let's jump into the news. There's a lot that went on this week. We're not going to give her a ton of airtime because she simply doesn't deserve it. But Elizabeth Warren's at it again. Disco, what's she up to this week?
Well, I mean, last week she was sitting there, they were doing whatever the event in New York was, and you had Jamie Dimon, saying, oh, watch out for the evils of crypto, and their only use case is pirates and Penzance or whatever.
I believe he said, it's very dangerous. I think you should shut it down. Like, you can't shut crypto down. You can only shut your citizens from benefiting and using it and having the innovation from it, right?
I think that all we really need to end on this topic is I think that it would be great if they would shut their mouths about the topic, because I don't think there's obviously motivations to maintain status quo or to attain more power or influence in what's going on. And I don't think it's tied to the technology. I think it's tied to the fear mongering, and I think it's tied to politics, and it's tied to dollars and keeping the dollars as they are. And the power structure as it is. So it's almost just, it's just white noise to me, but I hope that people aren't really, paying attention, and I hope that they have less influence than they may have. That's my fear.
I agree with you, but being a local trustee in a teeny little town, like
Mm-hmm.
part of me just wants to motivate people out there, like get involved at some point to change all this. Like we need more independent people in Washington, because this baby boomers running the country with knowledge that's analog is just not working. Yes, there's a lot of scammers. We had, FTX, we had 3 Arrows Capital. There was no shortage of scams, but your job should be to regulate those scams in a smart way. And they've eroded trust with our community. And the thing that sucks is they don't understand it enough to even care that there's good, smart people building in this space. All they see is the scams, or they're just using it to their benefit for political platform, which is extremely frustrating as a citizen.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if somebody, and I don't know if anyone's done this, but if someone had actual, poll numbers from her constituency on their actual take on, crypto overall, because at the end and the beginning of the day, they're supposed to be representative. It's supposed to be a representative democracy. It's not supposed to be, persons' vendettas or issues. So it'd be good. It'd be interesting to see. I don't know, but I'm sure there's some major markets in there and some smart folks that are on board the crypto train that would be like, dude, you're not representing us at all. So that's just a little tiring to see.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. So yeah, I think we've given her probably more lip service than she ever deserve. So with that said, let's kick to the next topic, and hopefully we don't have to keep talking about her, because it feels like the market didn't care either. There has been a sell-off. I honestly don't think that was related to the politics this time. I think it's just it was going up so fast, all of crypto, and at some point you got to have a little retrenchment, which hopefully it means we can just kind of fill our coffers a little more dollar cost average on the way up.
Absolutely. I think that's well said. So in more exciting news and bigger topics, you kind of look at the activity with some of the new projects, and specifically kind of the ordinal side of things. There were some pretty big developments in terms of some sales that happened there, and there's some buzz building in this world, and maybe we should talk a little bit about kind of what went down in the last couple of days on that front.
Yeah, Bitcoin ordinals are just absolutely going bonkers. There was a sale for ordinal number 2 for what was it, 10.5 ETH?
Yeah, it was
either 10.4 or 10.5 ETH. So here it is.
10.4,
right
10.4 bit, by the way.
So that's how baked into NFTs that I've been, even though I've been an ordinal since February. But yeah, it sold for 10.4 Bitcoin, and everybody's boasting that this is the biggest sale ever. I'm sorry, it was not inscription 1 or 2, it was inscription 8. And remember, Bitcoin starts with inscription 0. So this was the 9th inscription, or inscription number 8. And this honey badger, sold for 10.4 Bitcoin. This actually isn't the number 1 though. An ordinal punk, the crown ordinal punk, sold for 11.5 Bitcoin, which is the number 1 sale. So that one was before Magic Eden, when everything was literally done with mediators and on spreadsheets. So it was much more dangerous at the time, but there's folks like Flowstay and a bunch of people who are very honest and have done a great job at growing the whole ecosystem. But 11.5 Bitcoin is actually the top sale for an ordinal punk,
when you are looking at it from a straight Bitcoin perspective. But I think that they may be looking at it as 10.4 bit at this point, with the market rate or the market price of Bitcoin may translate to more in USD than the 11 when that happened, because Bitcoin probably wasn't at 42,000.
That is a good point. Yeah. So when last February, Bitcoin was, I don't think it was in the 16s anymore, but it was definitely, I'm going to call it the low 20s. So you are correct. From a dollar standpoint, it would have been much higher, probably 60, 70, 80% higher. But that also goes to show you, Disco, that over time, I don't even think of things in terms of dollars. I only do from when I have to pay the tax man and even up after every year, after I record all my trades. But otherwise, like 11.5 Bitcoin is still more than 10.4 Bitcoin, but you make a very good point.
Yeah, I like the entrenchment. I agree fully. I'm just merely pointing it out.
Yeah, the thing, I think it was Andreas Antonopoulos, someone used to always say, the price of Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, which you're like, wait, what do you mean? Oh, and that takes a while to get to, but I think, you're pretty steeped in this industry when the price of an ETH is one ETH and the price of a Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. It's not the dollar amount at all. They always say how volatile Bitcoin is, but, have you ever looked at a chart of the dollar compared to Bitcoin? So one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. Look at the dollar everywhere. Look how volatile it is, So that's kind of the joke. Obviously, Bitcoin probably doesn't have the global user base yet to be the de facto cornerstone, like stable asset of gold. But, that's the narrative. And that's certainly the one that I believe in.
Yeah. Well, there's one or a couple significant differences. One is that there's a fixed supply for the Bitcoin. And as we've said, pretty much every week, Ethereum is de-inflationary or disinflationary. So looking at that as opposed to the dollar I think you should just convert. I think you're right. Just make the conversion and consider it all in terms of the currency.
Yep, for sure. So also there's actually a bunch of Bitcoin news and with Ordinals. There's just so much cool stuff going on. And I guess we don't give this show enough probably air to Ordinals, considering I got in early and have been a huge proponent of it. We've kind of focused more on nodes and staking and Ethereum and stuff like that. But, those two chains we both believe in. The next one is really interesting. I have mixed feelings about this, but basically the BitcoinShrooms last year, these are some of the first Ordinals minted. So I believe the one you see here, BitcoinShrooms, is number 38. So this is the 38th ordinal. You saw the Honey Badger. That was the number 8 or the 9th ordinal. This is number 38. This just sold at close today. So breaking news for $241,000. And that's 5.7 Bitcoin for this one. And the reason this one sold, and I'll get to the prices of the other two in a bit, but why it's more than double the other ones is because this is a sub 100 ordinal. So this is a double digit ordinal, and it's also one of the first of the BitcoinShrooms. I think that S is either the first S or the last S, because under 100 they just spelled out shrooms, and then a lot of these are in the sub 1000. So these are 3 digits. So this is actually part of almost the logo or the brand, if you will. A little interesting note about BitcoinShrooms. So earlier this year, they did an auction for one of them, I believe, and it got up to like 2 or 3 Bitcoin, and all of a sudden, right in the middle, it wasn't through Sotheby's, it was through one of the exchanges. It was more direct, but they pulled it just out of, like, literally kind of rugged it in the middle out of thin air. And I think the market was starting, the initial heat of ordinals was starting to die down a little. And a lot of people in the space were really kind of pissed at them. Like it felt like a total rug, like, oh, the bear's coming, I'm not going to get as much. So he pulled it. Now, why the team pulled it, I don't know. But it definitely didn't have, to me, it didn't have a good feel to it at all. But they've held them ever since. There was even rumors that Nintendo was saying like, it's a little too close to our branding. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But here we are, 3 went on sales at Sotheby's. Go ahead, Disco.
No, I was just saying I can kind of see the Nintendo-esque or the Mario Brothers-esque on the headgear and
for sure.
Yeah,
especially
like
the top guy.
Yeah. Let's say it's an homage, if you will.
Yeah. So whether that was actually a whole, like whether Nintendo would actually even know, or if they could even figure out who the team was on an anonymous network is beyond me. But the fact that they now
Yeah.
are selling these, like, it's a blessing and a curse, right? For Ordinals bag holders, because it's a blessing because this Bitcoin shroom, this top guy went for 5.7 Bitcoin. Sovereign individual went for 107 grand, which is 2.6 Bitcoin in today's rate. And then the BIP 39 seed went for 101 grand, or 2.4 Bitcoin. So good sales, good overall for the ecosystem. The
Yeah.
the kind of punch in the nose on this that I don't love is that Sotheby's, like, and they've been early adopters in all this, and I think Christie's has to some extent too, but Sotheby's has really been early. They take a net aggregate of 40% of that sale, which,
Whoa.
if you do it on Magic Eden, and I'm not saying Magic Eden's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I think they take 2.5%. So that feels a lot better to me. But to do it here, this opens it up to a market that's obviously way bigger than the small Bitcoin ordinals ecosystem.
Yeah. So it can represent some sort of validity within the, trad art and, kind of the luxury collecting side of it. But
yeah.
by the same token, you're paying like 40% juice, on something. It's
Interestingly, I believe the juice, it's paid 20% by the lister and 20% by the buyer. So that's kind of a, I guess at the end of the day, you buy it for 240, and once you get hold of it, you certainly don't have to go through them again to sell it. So one could even argue you could. I'm just thinking out loud here. You could do a little arbitrage play. I mean, 40% is huge. Now, could you turn this right around and sell it for the same? If you're paying 240, could you turn around and sell it and make a little money? I don't know, but it is what it is. I did not put any bids on this. After they pulled the collection last year, I was not a huge fan, but I understand the importance of these, and the entire collection was an homage to a lot of milestones in what happened to Bitcoin. There's I think there's at least 100 of these, but I think the number's more like 200 or something like that. And their numbering range, I think, from in the 30s, so a bunch of double digits. But the highest one is actually not below 1,000. It's like, I think it's below 2,000, but it's like 1,100, 1,200. So they did not actually get them all under 1,000, which, if you're nitpicky, the whole collection, whereas Ordinal Punks, there's 100 of them. They're all under 1,000, starting in the 400s and ending in the 600s. So, you got your preferences and you got your likes on art and taste. I actually like this art. I just don't like how this was handled, and now it's going through more of a traditional house, knowing that it could benefit the entire Ordinals ecosystem with new blood coming in.
Yeah, it's again, it's remarkable in going back to kind of the birth of Ordinals, right? So you have the most established chain that has been, doing what it's doing and kind of building its reputation for sticking to what it's doing, right? And then all of a sudden, Ordinals come in, and in such a short period of time, if you really sit back, say you were just going to start collecting right now, a lot of the parameters that have been introduced from the ordinal theory are really potentially very transformative on so much of what could happen in the next kind of wave of development of blockchain overall, and specifically, collecting and how you're doing all that. So it's really fascinating to see something that started not that long ago, yet now you kind of are looking more like, okay, where is it really stored, as we've talked about before? What's the number? And I really I'm buckled up and interested to see kind of how it all shakes out, because before, like when I first got in and when you were, getting involved with NFTs, it was, a total Ethereum play. And now you're seeing, Bitcoin really kind of almost setting up a new kind of framework as to how to value and launch programs and projects. So, I remember sitting with you in Las Vegas, and you were like, I'll never forget it. I was trying to ask you, like, what's this all about? Like, explain a little bit on Ordinals, and you were talking, basically like checkers to, like Star Trek chessboards.
Right.
And you're starting to really see, I think collectors are going to be asking for more and more of the intricacies and kind of the nuances that are baked into the ordinal theory.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think what makes Bitcoin really interesting, because NFTs, Ethereum has smart contracts. So it was set up to be able to pull these things out, adding tokens to the Ethereum ecosystem and adding, non-fungible tokens, NFTs. But with Bitcoin, you were limited to kind of an older system that doesn't have these smart contracts. So, when you inscribe things permanently on sats, it's the closest thing to actually being, if you think about it, a coin collector or a stamp collector. Yeah. So, and the funny thing is, Bitcoin's mantra from the maxis is, Bitcoin is the most pure form of money, and inscription numbers, just like dollar serial numbers and age. And, was it in the Philadelphia Mint, which I believe is a P versus D is either Washington or Delaware, on the dollar bill. So,
yes.
My brother used to be into coins and stamp collecting. He's much older than me, but when he was a kid, but I understand the draw to that with Bitcoin, like going to a sat that Satoshi Nakamoto actually had mined himself, like to put a collection on there that adds meaning to that, and to have an inscription number to be one of the first to inscribe, like you just saw with the shrooms, like it adds a whole layer that Ethereum just doesn't have.
Yeah. And when we were talking just about the honey badger or whatever, like if that's number 8, like 8 is an extremely popular number, and like to have ownership of that is pretty badass, if you really think about it. And then
for sure, single digit, insane.
Yeah. But 8, like the, how it's continuous.
Oh, like infinity. Okay.
Yeah, like it's got
it may or may not be my favorite number. I don't want to dox myself, but I love the number 8.
There's a big cultural following for 8, believe me. So here's a question that just popped in my head that I don't know if it's an obvious answer, but it comes from this. So I'll just ask you. So what happens to NFTs that were from OpenSea if OpenSea goes out of business and shuts down?
No, they're still there on the smart contract. So other marketplaces could open, and let's say all the marketplaces closed, you could still make a marketplace that just taps into the smart contract into Ethereum for that collection. And that's what the CryptoPunks did. And they were obviously done before the ERC 721 standard. So that's why you cannot buy and sell CryptoPunks on OpenSea or Blur. You have to buy and sell the wrapped CryptoPunks. They're wrapping it in the ERC 721 framework so that you can buy and sell, and then you can unwrap it to do that. It's a really good question though. There's actually one more on the Bitcoin side that's getting a ton of buzz, and I gotta say I'm liking these things. They're called NodeMonkeys, and these are early inscription collections. So if you look at the range, it's 83,522 is the lowest NodeMonkeys inscription, and 111,319 is the highest one. The big buzz about NodeMonkeys, it's actually been getting a lot of positive and negative buzz out there. I think some of the negative buzz may be warranted, but a lot of it I think is people just feeling angry to me. But NodeMonkeys' claim is that it's the first true 10,000 piece collection, PFP collection on Bitcoin. BitcoinPunks, which is copy pasta of CryptoPunks, there's nothing original there. I believe their last one does fall below 111,000. I think they're actually all below 100,000. But, being a Ethereum CryptoPunk holder, like I think it's crap. I can't stand those things. And the fact that those have any value, I think is pretty silly. But like I get why people would want to collect them. But NodeMonkeys are truly the first one of original art, and they're elegant in their simplicity. But that is going to launch soon, and they've gotten a lot of flack for. It was first they said it was going to be free. And then they were going to give a bunch to charities, and actually the core dev teams for Bitcoin and even for Ordinals were like, nope, that's too much. Like, we don't even want it. So they're like, okay, like, we got to do something with this. So they're looked at other charities but they found that like the same entities were like using different accounts to try and just get more money. So they're like, okay, you know what, we got to do this the most fair way possible and go to a Dutch auction. But I think on the heels of Shrooms, one thing going over to Ordinals that I always said to you is I'm not a fan of 10,000K collections anymore, because, with Ordinals, like, I love that Ordinal Punks only have 100 inscribed Peppies. There's only 69 Lil Peppos on uncommon sats, which most are below the 500 inscription of uncommon sats are. There's 420 of them, so it's a very small number, but I gotta say I'm coming around to this. The art's grown on me more. I will definitely be picking up a couple of these, and I think there's a lot of buzz around there. I think a lot of people are excited, and this could be on the heels of the Shrooms kind of mainstream Sotheby's auction. This could be kind of the cool CryptoPunk moment for Bitcoin Ordinals and the truly first unique 10,000K collection. What are your thoughts, Disco, from kind of a one step removed?
Well, I think looking at it, it has, it's got kind of the aesthetic that kind of feels like something that could be, timeless in terms of, kind of, I don't know, CryptoPunk-esque to a degree, so that's encouraging and exciting. And I'm curious, if you open up these collections to the 10,000, units, so to speak, will that be able to help garner more, kind of community and just kind of make it bigger than, just the handful of people that were involved early on some of the ones that you've been talking about? So there's 400 of whatever, there's people that have multiples, obviously. So I just wonder, maybe this 10,000, collection would help to kind of have a bigger impact on, the entire, ecosystem, as opposed to more of like, an elite, or not elite, but kind of more of an insider group that understands this early adoption. Maybe it could lead to more kind of mainstreamification of it, and maybe it really could be, one of those, flags planted in the history of, digital art moving forward. So I'm definitely going to keep my eye on it and see what I can do to get involved, because I think that would be really important to kind of have, and I'd love to be a part of, like, the inaugural part of a new community that's very, potentially significant. And I'd love to kind of see that genesis play out and go on that, instead of like waiting to get in on something after it's kind of had its launch and heyday. So I don't know. Those are my initial takes.
No, that's a good take. And that's something that a lot of kind of Ordinals groups, because remember, a lot of these that I named, Ordinal Punks or Bitcoin Rocks, like, a lot of the people who own all of those are a lot of the same folks. So you've got, even within, if you mash a bunch of communities together, there's Discord groups for sub 1,000 holders, sub 10,000 holders, but a lot of these are kind of the same folks. So think about it, like the sub 10K collection, any Ordinal inscribed in the first 10,000, it's all over the map, Bitcoin Rocks, the Shrooms, you saw the Ordinal Punks, and then just a whole bunch of other good stuff, and a lot of just gobbledygook or stuff that's repetitive or, just garbage, right? Stuff you don't want. So the hard part about that is, it's hard to have it's hard to galvanize a community when you only have 100 plus 60 plus 120. When you have 10,000, that's when you can, make an impact. So let's say every, it's never 10,000 people holding, but we'll call it 5,000 people holding, maybe 6,000. Most people have one, but a lot of people have 2, 4, 10 or whatever. So let's say you have 5,000 people holding. That can kind of be a force. And, we learned about Twitter and the algorithms and how they work. The more you have on there and the more that support each other and start following each other, the more that they can like and repost and echo everybody else's stuff. So, the way you phrase that, I think NodeMonkeys could be Bitcoin's and Ordinals' big moment in this, to finally get a big enough group where a bunch of the kind of holdouts from the Ethereum side finally get a wallet, which have come a long way, and go to Magic Eden and just drop for one of them. I think it's very possible and very feasible and very likely.
Yeah, and it feels like you would probably be, I think you hit on one part recently or a second ago where it's like, I think you're more likely to get the conversion from, people that were used to collecting the Ethereum side of things. And I think that Solana, I don't know if you'd necessarily be pulling a lot of the Solana NFT collectors. I think that may be kind of a different kind of ethos, or, kind of a different group that you're dealing with. It'd be interesting to see. I wonder if you could, that would be interesting just to see.
Because think about it, DeGods went from Solana to Ethereum, but they're on Bitcoin too. So they've crossed all over. And now you've said that, didn't you just mention that they were saying you could bridge back from Ethereum to Solana? So I don't know, to me, it almost feels like, oh, Solana's cool again and it's pumping. Like, hey, you can go back. But, DeGods is also on Amazon web servers. So to me, like, if you're going to buy NFTs, like, at least make sure it's IPFS or Arweave. Like, don't get stuff that's on Amazon S3. All that thing has to do is go down, or Amazon has, I doubt they would, but have like a no NFT policy. But once the founders leave, they can stop paying those bills at some point. And those images, like, you can have your own copy, your right click save copy. But the fact that those are on centralized servers and most people out there don't care is beyond me. In fact, you just mentioned, as a good segue, the Art Basel down in Miami. You said there was a couple parties that made a big buzz, and those were also the ones that pumped. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, so I'm sure, I'm not going to explain to everybody what Art Basel is necessarily, but I went to it. My first one I went
Basel.
to was,
I probably sound like such a dipshit. Art Basel. So tell me about Art Basel. I'm an art collector. Art Basel. I'll never make that mistake again, I promise.
Anyhow, it's been going on. I don't know for how long that it came into Miami, but I went maybe 3, 4, or 5 years ago, and I've gone twice. And if you're an NFT collector, and this was before NFTs really started going, but it's such a perfect match because it's all about celebrating art and the, kind of excitement and the vibrancy, and it works well with the whole South Beach. And South Beach is set up, as, what is it, like Vegas and South Beach are the biggest competitors for conventions. So, they know how to have the infrastructure to make these things happen. Sure. But nevertheless, a lot of the news that kind of came to your feed and to your consciousness this past week probably had a pretty indirect, if not totally direct, connection to the sponsorships and the events that were going on in South Beach last week. So, you had like Pudgy Penguins, Pudgy had a big party there. Solana did a big sponsorship called Artists in Residence. So they made a big, push and impact there. And from, kind of the secondary, tertiary feedback I've gotten, it was like, there were a lot of people talking about, oh, if you're a Solana holder, you get access to this, or, So it kind of works that way. And it's interesting to see how these in-person events then translate to, buzziness, and then the buzziness turns to pumpiness, and you kind of go back to the genesis of what it was. So if you really look at some of the events that were going on there, so many of them then ended up kind of leading to kind of some buzz and bump. And I would certainly say Solana for whatever it is, has certainly created a narrative of a lot of buzz over the last maybe 60 days and moving forward. Whereas, you kind of have been hearing, you heard about the airdrop that they did, and the Jito airdrop for their, token for that, and everyone was really excited about that. Prior to that, they captured a lot of attention with Bonk, and it's like, so all of a sudden you're hearing all these different things, and again, it's about the orchestration, and you got to give credit to whoever the strategists are behind kind of planting these seeds to be able to kind of get this to get some more traction, and to really get a share of voice of the consciousness of which blockchains are really going to be thriving in the future, and ultimately getting more people on board and utilizing it. I saw Raoul Paul, I'm probably mispronouncing the name, but I saw him on a, I don't know what it was, a little video feed of some sort, and he was making the equation, or he was saying that he believes now that Solana, due to its UX, is positioned to become the Apple, and that Ethereum is positioned to be the Android, because the Solana UX is so slick and easy to use, and people will like that and kind of would appreciate it from the side of people that appreciate how the iPhone UX and simplicity in their design is. So
yeah, I hate to give Solana all this time. How does that resonate with you? Because to me, it screams like, I feel like there's some bullshit there, it's interesting what you said, that you said one word, strategist, and that shows you that Solana, like that foundation, is like a company. Remember, this Solana, I think a lot of Ethereans, even though there's this ongoing battle between Solana and Ethereum, and obviously Bitcoin doesn't even pay attention to Solana, but it's because Solana has these VCs that were behind it. They held so much at launch for themselves, way over 50% between the VCs and the foundation and like the founding sponsors. It was just a ton were withheld by them. We just saw that was it 60% of Solana is staked. So, when something's staked, it's not available. It's not on the exchanges. It's not being traded. So one could keep something really inflated. But when you say the word strategists, and when I think of layer twos and Polygon and some of these were there, trying to get deals, these guys are trying to get deals with Disney and these big companies to do NFTs. Like, I get it, but it shows you when you start, you really are a company. Like the Web3 stuff is almost just smoke and mirrors, and you're trying to grow that ecosystem. And that's what these guys are doing. And I guess because it started with VCs and they held so much at the beginning and probably hold a ton now, that's why I think I owned some, like a teeny bit of Solana at one point. That's why their lack of decentralization is why it's hard for me to spend another penny on it. I'm not saying that it's not going to go up. It probably will. And I think they're doing a good job at certainly dominating crypto Twitter and like jumping all over every conversation. Like there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of influencers who have turned in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 months. A lot of people like CryptoPunks and a lot of people all of a sudden are like, I'm seeing the light. And it's just interesting how they're all seeing the light around the same time, and it's pumping hard. And it's just something feels like, there's the room where it happens, as they say in Hamilton, and I'm not in that room, but I'm just looking at the metrics and the numbers, and the ecosystem's growing. But is it deserving of a 3x from October? I don't know.
And
I don't think so.
Is the growth and the utilization of it commensurate with the share of voice that the narrative is getting? And that's kind of the thing that we really have to try to understand. It's like, and because what you're saying, I completely agree, because you almost hear very similar verbiage, where it's almost like, hey, this is what you push out, or this is what our narrative is, because it's like, oh, well, now, I see it. And the reason that I brought up the Raoul Paul part was that he was one of the first people that I started, paying attention to when I first wanted to kind of learn about it. And I remember him talking all the time about being irresponsibly long on ETH, and, ETH, And then to see these, and even, let's be honest, David Hoffman went to the Solana event, this.
Andy's talking about Mad Lads, which I checked. Mad Lad. I was like, all right, the new Solana NFT that's going nuts. Those have to be on Arweave or IPFS to be at least decentralized. They're not. They're on Amazon Web Services. They're on S3. It's like, that makes no sense to me. And those Mad Lads, I would assume D-Gods are behind it, or the artist, because I mean, it's the same duty profile of Utes. They all have that same kind of look. And there's some cool ones in there, don't get me wrong. But again, it's like it's being hosted on Web 2. There's nothing is less Web 3 than something hosted on central cloud servers, in my opinion.
Yeah, and just to kind of tie the knot with the Art Basel stuff, and you saying like, hey, it's a business, when we're talking, and I use the term strategist because I meant to, what I mean? And it reminds me.
Got me all fired up.
Yeah, it was a little
14-minute tangent because you said strategist. You know how to I'll poke him. Here we go. You're like my kids. You know how to get a rise out of me with like one word.
But when I was in another life, I used to go to South by Southwest as part of my job in the music industry, and it's become a whole other animal now in terms of how
right.
big it is and all the things it touches. But when I was there, it was the exact same deal, dude. It was like you had the labels were doing everything they could to get people to go see their bands at those parties. And it was really like a battle within of like, oh, dude, you're going to go see that? Oh, come on, dude, come to this one.
That's so last year.
Yeah. So it was always about like who, what influencers you could get to go to see your, rising artists. And it then translated to the people that weren't there at the other, parts of the music business. So it's very similar in terms of this, hey, we're going to use these big events in person to then translate to buzz. It happened a little bit, when we went to the Azuki party. Like that worked prior. It didn't, play out well for them down the road with how they, whatever strategist told them to go with the, ordinal drop and everything, and the just throwing so many new things into the market and diluting what they had going on. But there's something about this activation of the IRL stuff that is very strategic behind the scenes.
Well, think about it. I mean, that Azuki party was literally 2 days before the drop, and we have our whole first episode, and this is one I had to get off my chest because I've been with Azuki since the beginning, and I love all the people in it. I even think the founders are great people. I just think, God, was that tone deaf, and it was just such a power terrible move, but it diluted everything. But it goes to your point, and you were there with me in Vegas. Parties work. They create that FOMO brain, and they create all that buzz. Whether that buzz lasts remains to be seen. Obviously with Azuki it didn't, but that was a 2/3 dilution event overnight. But it sounds like, so the big ones you said were D-Gods, Solana. What were the big three you said at our
Pudgies, Penguin.
Yeah.
But
so at least the Pudgy guy
saw that stuff go, so that's what's interesting, is kind of track these sponsorships. And I'm not, it sounds like I'm almost selling, the ROI for these events to do the sponsorships, but there is a bounce that comes from it. And
they work,
it's kind of
for sure. They work. It sounds like we need to go to more of these things just to get out there and get a buzz. But, it's once you get into the influencer realm and the rings of influencers that start pumping this stuff, you just wonder, like, who's behind the Solana? Was Bankless, like, is there some deals or any Solana funds flowing to David for getting a Mad Lad and stuff like that? And that's why, it's not on their disclosure sheet, but they've got 78 other things that they're aligned with or advisors to, or who are sponsors, or who they have angel investment money with. That's why, that's part of the reason Disco and I started this show. When I go out to listen to a show, I love Peter McCormack's What Bitcoin Did. I think his talking about macro is fascinating, but with Bankless, I can't listen anymore. Or if I do, I'm going to cherry pick if it's a really good guest, because I don't know if what they're saying is honest and true. So I think that's when you and I started talking about, like, well,
Yeah.
let's get the news ourselves and be unbiased. Obviously when you start, you've got no sponsors, but that's something we want to hold ourselves to anyway, is be honest out there and give newer people especially an upper hand, so they don't make a lot of the mistakes, no offense, that you made, that everybody makes when they come in at the top of a bowl. Like, I would have made the same mistakes had I come in at the top of a bowl. I would have lost a ton of money, and then I would have been curious, stuck around, and now finally be like, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And I think it's going to pay off for all of us in this next one. But so that's why we're here. That's why we're here.
Yeah. And I think, that kind of ties to, there's some news this week about, like, Rug Radio, partnering with Decrypt moving forward, and, some of this consolidation. And I think that our North Star, has always been trying to just examine things from a non-biased and nuanced perspective. Right. And I think that, I'm on board with you on the bankless side of it, because that was such a egregious pivot. It was like, it's you're building your thing on being ETH maxis, and now you're like, but Solana's pretty got a lot going on too. And I understand you want to cover things, but you kind of got to be true to what you came in as. And I would be really curious to see who is able to fill the void of being kind of a non-biased resource. And I think deep down, that's what I hope that we can develop this into, because it's so hard. Even you see, Instagram posts or Twitter posts of, buy this altcoin before the ETF and all this stuff, or, this is my price projection, and no one's showing their work on the research, and they don't want to know that. And I know that you've like,
source is always blank at the bottom of the slide. You notice that? Like, what's your source? What year is this? And what coin is, like, just give me where you're getting this information from.
Yeah. Just where you're getting it. And I know that you've even asked, kind of, some follow-up questions to some people posting, and no one really wants to get into showing you the math, behind the work. So it's interesting there. I think there's an opportunity, and I think there's more than an opportunity. I think there's a need for, when we get into this next run, for, places where people can go for just, some straight up news and analysis. That's not, what bag are they pumping, or who's behind it, or who's a strategist and everything. So
yeah, hopefully we all get rich together, and I don't even want to say slow, because I think with the next ETF, I think at some point there's going to be a squeeze on Bitcoin and Ethereum, and maybe maybe Solana and some of these others. I don't know, but we want to go with the ones that are tried and true, that are getting the most use and have the most varied utility, because a busy blockchain and a blockchain in high demand is a good blockchain. Now, Solana's argument, I think, is like, we can just keep throwing compute power at it and keep fees low. Why should fees have to be high? Like with Ethereum, who wants to interact on that? And obviously on Ethereum, as a staker, I'm like, bring up those, L1 Ethereum fees high, because I'm staking, and the more people are willing to offer for transactions, and if I can actually propose one, the more I get. Like when I got that heyday of 1.4 ETH this summer, and then the L2s can take care of more inexpensive, and possibly eventually L3s can take care of very frictionless, cheaper transactions for video games and things that, you can't have huge expenses while you're trading items in and out of games all the time. So, there's trade-offs there, but I think what most everyone can agree on is Ethereum versus Solana is more decentralized for sure. And, because anybody can, with an internet connection and a big enough hard drive, can set up and run a validator at least. And that's not to just a validator, just to validate the network. I'm talking about staking. So
I think it'll be, just on that really quick, I've been thinking about it, I don't know how many L2s are going to, really stand the test of time. And it will be interesting to kind of see, I understand what you're saying completely. Like some of them, something could be dedicated, specifically to gaming or whatever it is, and kind of get, more specialized. But from more of kind of the, global perspective or use perspective, who do you, it'll be interesting to see which one which one, two, or three, kind of really are the ones that are, stick with us and aren't the Betamax, right? So, is it optimism? Is it Arbitrum? Is it Polygon? And to your point earlier, I wanted to go back to that, was we're seeing a lot of corporatization, kind of, these different companies, and looking at them now as companies, and business development's a big part of it,
It
so
is
these
big time.
people that are saying, hey, Polygon's got a deal with Disney, that's a big headline and that looks great. But then when you really, look into it, it's like, how much is really that, being able to kind of flash the logo and be like, hey, we're partnered with Disney, as opposed
Right.
to how much is really going to happen from that partnership.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but I disagree with the sense that with L2s, there's nothing limiting an L2 from spinning up and just meeting this one niche. I mean, the point of L2s is to obviously create cheaper transactions and then, have them ultimately validated on the base layer Ethereum L1. So that's the beauty of Ethereum, and that's why I'm such a huge proponent of staking and validating, because you're securing the entire network and everything that stacks on top of it. But obviously some of these will be bigger than others, and who knows, what is it, Immutable X, and now Injective is the big one that are those going to be big in the gaming thing? And if you scroll back a couple of years, they both already had huge runs, and then when they were kind of announced, and now that the bull is back, we're a couple years further, and these guys, some of them have been actually working on the infrastructure to have more games come out. I don't think we're quite there yet where it's going to hit the mainstream, but now everything's spiking again. So is this the time to like try and catch the caboose before the train's going too fast and you can't, run out of tracks and catch it? Or are we going to see a little like lull there before stuff actually happens? I guess what I've found over time is, even if you missed it and it went up, there's always going to be corrections. Like, do your homework first, because at some point, I think, obviously none of this is financial advice, but we will recommend one of these that probably will have the most traction, or a couple of them that might be a good flyer for you when there's a correction. But I'm personally not there yet, because I think most prices on most coins and tokens, or whatever you want to call them, are pure speculation right now.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it's easier. Yeah, that it'll shape itself over time. I think that I agree with you in that. It's almost like change coming out of the couch all of a sudden. These names you haven't heard from, now it's Bully, and you're starting to hear all about it. It's like, okay, now we're talking about Cosmos and all these different ones that you haven't really heard it. So it goes back to what's going to get the traction, what's going to get the transactions. And
what influencers are coming out of the woodwork for what token. And that's the one that nobody can see transparently, because all of a sudden, like, look at Portal Coin. Like, I don't see it on my timeline now, thank God. Or maybe I saw someone this morning, but like that was a straight week and a half to 2 weeks of just farming to get more, to get the potential of a higher airdrop. And to me, pre-game, like, F off, like, get that crap out of here. Like, I almost wish Twitter would shadow ban or dock them for doing that garbage. Like, I don't want to see that crap in the timeline, and it caused me to unfollow a lot of people and at least mute people to prune the timeline.
So do you think that Ethereum, due to its more decentralized roots, is at its significant disadvantage to tapping into influencers, because influencers tie into kind of the business, what we were talking about, like, being a business and a strategy. So it's like, deploy money towards the influencers and gain, share and influence essentially. And would like the foundation get into that from the Ethereum side of it? Or, it seems like Bitcoin, as you said before, yeah, you've always had the maxis and you've had but it's always been like, let it do what it does. And, we're confident in what it is. And you said like, hey, Bitcoin's not concerned about Solana. And So I'm just wondering if we're kind of experiencing, just an influx of influencer, because people are trying to position, for this next wave and being kind of the it
Yeah.
coin or the it token and what that is.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I haven't thought of it in that context, but that's exactly what's happened. Because remember, Ethereum, even though it still gets congested and expensive, a lot of people, people in the Solana world, the hardware guys, say that's a bug. And, again, I see it as a feature. Like, that means that block space is valuable. Now, is there going to be room for both chains? Yeah, probably. But Ethereum, I don't think needs to promote itself as much anymore, and it is far more decentralized, so it promotes itself now. I think where that's happening is on the layer twos, right? I mean, because all those
Right.
layer twos right now, those are still, there's not one of them that's decentralized yet. They're all multi-sig wallets held by a couple people, and that's, I don't know if that's taboo to talk about, but it's like, that's the reality. They are centrally held. Now they've airdropped and a lot more people have it, but they're holding the multi-sig purse to those smart contracts, which, if you think about it, it's crazy. Now the plan is to then decentralize that and eventually turn that off, but that's hard to do, because once you do it,
Yeah.
you better have set all those dominoes up right, because if that one, is turned sideways or the gap's a little too big, then, the grand finale where all the dominoes go down the bucket and then the balloon pops and then the waterfall and then all the other stuff for the Rube Goldberg machine, that doesn't happen. So,
Sorry, I got a little, I was going down the domino, the domino visual.
well, I like dominoes. What can I say?
That
Everybody
sucked me
loves
in.
a good dominoes YouTube video here and there, Like, those are all going to fall. Wow. How many rooms is that in?
I don't think I realized what you just said. Like, I got to process that was the case on the L2s, and there's no way. Like, it sounds good as a soundbite or oh yeah, well we'll end up making it to central. I don't know.
And they will. I think eventually they have to. I mean, on Ethereum, it would be, I guess you could keep getting away with not, but at some point other people are, and, ZK is going to make it more privacy transactions. So there's so many layer twos that are doing and solving so many different problems. And remember, ETH itself hasn't even fully hardened yet. They've still got tons of proposals coming out for proto-dank sharding to make it even more efficient to run on the main chain. So whereas Bitcoin, has done updates. Obviously, they did SegWit and Taproot, which allowed for ordinals and for block space to be rearranged more efficiently. Ethereum, whereas Bitcoin's doing things to kind of benefit and go towards hardening to be the digital gold, and the maxis are cringe, but with ordinals, I think is awesome. To me, a permanent store of information too, whether that's Satoshi's white paper or art or whatever. But on the Ethereum side, there's still a roadmap on layer one that makes it where it's not fully hardened. So it's all it's all still a work in progress. Like, I it's getting old saying like we're so early, but
right.
we're in the whole grand scheme of crypto, we're so early. And just think, hopefully our civilization is around in hundreds and hundreds of years, but like at some point, if you have that optimistic view that it is, like, these are going to play some role, because institutions are only so, and states are only so powerful for so long, and then things shuffle, things change, and there could be another dark ages or something where there's total iron fist control, but in the long run, it's a beautiful thing.
And thinking about it just from the very current perspective, I have a bunch of things to say after what you just said. Is right now the focus is on Bitcoin from the interest perspective due to the ETF. And that means that has to kind of go through and be the first wave. So people are going to have to understand and educate just on the basics of Bitcoin, which, if you look at it from a digestible perspective for institutional investors or people getting into the space, it's not that hard to wrap your head around the fixed supply, the 21 million, works as money, or works as, that, as opposed to sitting down and explaining all of the applications and ways that Ethereum can manifest over the coming years. So it's just a little bit more, takes a little bit more effort to digest all the different elements of what you're talking about. So in the beginning right now, when we're kind of in this, waiting for the January 8th to 10th, when they're supposed to announce the Bitcoin ETF, it should work as kind of the plow to get, new people involved into crypto overall. And it is pretty simple to explain relative to all the different things that are happening on Ethereum and all the different things that can happen from that perspective, that it kind of is working as a blocker. And I just think that right now might really be the time to remain focused on Ethereum and really be excited about where that's going. Because when kind of the spotlight's not on you, that's kind of the right time to, really make sure everything's in place. So,
that's a good point. ETH has definitely not had its run, has it? Because Bitcoin went from 20, we'll just call it simple numbers, 20 to 40, right? So Bitcoin doubled in the last, whatever it is, 3 months. Solana has tripled in the last 3 months, triple plus, I believe, like 20-ish to 60-ish, right? So, and that, I think everyone's picking Solana to be like, and I'm not saying on this show we are, but to be that number 3, right? So ETH has gone from what, 2,000, 1,900 to 2,200. It hasn't really seen a rise, and ETH is the only deflationary one. It's a little bizarre. I guess my theory on that again is Bitcoin's going to get all the attention. I think Solana has so many influencers where, and maybe Avalanche too, where their influence is outsized to what's actually being done. And, I think that influence has also probably caused more NFT developers to be like, oh, let's develop more NFTs, and a lot of the folks who went over there are big into hardware, and hardware does solve a lot of problems. So, maybe Solana having the fastest network and kind of subsidizing the costs like they do, maybe that will help. But I love that Ethereum hasn't popped yet, because to me, I don't even look at it anymore as a number 2 to Bitcoin. I look at it as different to Bitcoin. It's the first smart contract chain, right? That's where all the crappy shitcoin ICO happened of whatever that was, 2017, 2018, whatever year that was. Right. But all these things you could do, and then NFTs blew up in what, like 17, 18, but really in 2021. So I just think, I think it's a good play. But when you see Solana triple, you kind of, you wonder, but I think ETH is a good play, and I think it's drafting right now, and there's so much activity on the chain. In fact, if you want to explain a little, as we go through this, Disco in our pre-show is saying, there's so many talking heads out there who just like Bitcoin prediction, Bitcoin's going to be at $84,000 by the end of next week. Like, it's just all total BS. So it's like, where's your data? So, the more we get into this, the more we want to use real data and find the metrics that are important to us. Like, what are people actually, what are they actually using? So explain this chart a little, if you could.
Yeah, I was looking, I was feeling the FOMO and feeling like some slight Ethereum FUD, kind of infiltrating my mind, and made me kind of try to look for something to, kind of validate or, back up some of the things that I come to believe in my mind. And I came across this root data site, and it was really, I think it was very reassuring, frankly. One of the ways that you can utilize the information on this is, they have the amount of projects that are being built on the various blockchains. So again, we're talking about, are we hearing outsized narratives on certain chains based on influencers or strategies or whatever it is? But if you really come down to the bread and butter, it's, you want a busy blockchain, and what's going to make a blockchain busy is going to be the activity and the projects that are being built on it. So you can look at this, you can sort by ecosystem activity, and Ethereum comes up with 2,144 projects currently being actively built or utilized on the blockchain. The next one under it is Polygon with almost 1,300. Again, that's a L2 to Ethereum. So it kind of goes, you kind of got to put that in the Ethereum pot, right? You have BNB after that. Who really knows how that's all going to build out or play out? That's kind of on the decline, at least from a Western perspective, for sure. Then you have Arbitrum coming up again. And, under Arbitrum, you have Avalanche. And then after Avalanche, you have Solana. So
an Avalanche and Solana are at 5 in the 500s, whereas again, ETH was 2,000, Polygon was 1,200 projects, Arbitrum was 710. So you get the point. Like between Solana and Avalanche, that's 1,000 total, totally different chains. So they're growing, but your point was it made you feel more convicted in your belief that Ethereum was just keeping its head down and building.
And that's deep down, that made me fundamentally even more bullish, because it's not playing the game of, trying to get the biggest share of voice right now, or being kind of, the cool kid in the classroom or at the party. It's like, it's just becoming more deflationary, being used more, and just building away right now, and almost waiting for people to uncover, how much is really happening there. And that was my eye-opening thing in looking at some of the different tokens that had buzz recently. And I was like, well, that's still Ethereum. Oh, that's still on Ethereum. People talking about like Render and all these other ones are getting buzz here and there. And then when I dig down and just look at, what they're being built or deployed on, a lot of them are Ethereum. So
6 of the top 10 here are Ethereum. You got Base at number 10, ZK Sync at number 9. You got Optimism, of course, at number 7. You got Arbitrum at 4, Polygon at 2, and then, of course, you got the base chain itself, Ethereum, at 1. So just dominating the top 10 with its layer 1 and layer 2s.
So, and isn't Base built on Optimism? I think that was what it was.
Yeah, I think you're right. Obviously, that's Coinbase's layer 2. But yeah, it's on the Ethereum system. So that's all we really care about, is Ethereum securing these networks as well. And the answer to those is yes, which to me, a busy chain and a varied chain and more stuff going on and building layers on top of that. The more layers you build on top of a foundational L1 chain, the more that L1 chain in some capacity serves as a money. There's no plainer way to say that. It's a financial instrument at the bottom, securing the network. It's beautiful in its architecture. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of the words to express this thought that just came to me based on this conversation. But essentially, there was kind of a backlash on VC funded projects in the last cycle, when you kind of zoom back and look at it, like, oh well, that was VC funded. I wonder how much that could be the case moving forward on these farming and airdrop projects. It's like, oh, there's a bunch of buzz on this. It's like, yeah, because they just dumped a bunch of tokens in people's wallets. So how much is that like going to translate to real utilization and growth of activity on a blockchain? It could get you a little buzz, but is that then going to come back? Like, yeah, we gave away a lot of X, Y, or Z and people have these tokens, but who knows if they're going to be at any value in 6 months, 6 years, or whatever it is. Whereas I think that after looking at just the tonnage of building and of activity, it kind of just settled the FOMO factor in my head a little bit.
Well, look at Yuga's other deeds. There was VC money behind that. They started with 100,000, I think, but there's like 200,000 other deeds. And I will admit it, I FOMO'd into that mint. Like it was, and I didn't even FOMO in right away. I wasn't even planning on it. And I was watching, I saw how bad the gas rates went through the roof because it wasn't an efficient contract at all. It was kind of, it wasn't as bad as the Azuki Elemental thing, in my opinion, because my bags were way heavier packed on the Elementals than the Azuki side, but it was definitely screwy. Think about it. Think about how much money, because they made people KYC in for that. So that, because they had VC, the VCs wanted KYC. That's back when the NFT market was really good. And those guys probably made a fortune. Yuga got X amount of dollars to share X amount of profits from this. Once they got that initial thing, obviously if royalties were still a thing, they'd want to keep that churn, that money printing machine going. But, I'm sure there's some royalties from that, but they're not as big as now as I would expect, as royalties have kind of crept to zero because of Blur. But I mean, that move that they made netted them a lot of money, Yuga that is, but it also, again, diluted the ecosystem. Like how much, when that 3D metaverse is finally done being built and people are on there, like if you have 6 apes and 4 of those apes are rare and you have real estate super close, you're probably going to stay engaged longer, but everyone else is going to be like, where am I? Like this is like the equivalent of like Tanzania or something, like I don't even have a boat to get over to you. I mean, how do you possibly, and I know they have portals and different, but think about how complex of a game you're building up and creating, and everybody still has to just be like, let's go. I mean, this could take years to build and get right. And, I hope they nail it. And, for all the kind of downplaying of Yuga, like they've done a lot of good things and they kind of invented the mold of the new thing. But I think what has been proven with Azuki, even with Yuga, like the more you add to a collection, eventually it's going to dilute. Now, can Bored Apes keep each bull cycle? Can that be the coolest, hottest NFT to kind of show your status each cycle? I don't know, because to me, I don't know if those stand the test of time. It's again, I go back to like the 90s when that one year, we all wore neon like hats because I think they finally could print neon, and that trend went and it was gone in a flash. Now I'm not comparing Bored Apes to neon, but it could go out of style, whereas a CryptoPunk, also owned by Yuga, is more timeless and an early part of the collection. It's on chain. It checks more boxes to be art and long lasting, in my opinion.
Well, I think that it's kind of what we talked about earlier with the advent of, the ordinal theory and everything like that. Every cycle should probably, or will probably have its own value structure. And, what was relevant, in the previous cycle may not maintain its relevance unless there's, tweaking and kind of making sure that it fits kind of what's in vogue at the time. And I think that we're seeing a kind of a transition in that. One last thing on Yuga, it's like, let's not forget that Yuga was talking about as a business, like that was a Hollywood influencer business to the extreme, being backed by, so we're talking about influencer stuff when they're handing stuff out to Paris Hilton and to frickin' Jimmy Fallon, and it's coming from, Guy Oseary, it's like,
I think Eminem had one too. They like whatever that agent group was. Yeah. Was it, would you say it was Guy Oseary?
It was Guy Oseary. Yeah. And, I knew him when he started as Madonna's manager, and, then he got Maverick Records and blah, 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 blah. But I mean, talk about ultimate insider influencer. Like that's where that really kind of got its legs. So,
right. That's the old school influencers, right?
Yeah. So all that being said, it made me feel a lot more relaxed and steadfast in my belief that, a lot of the Ethereum's where I'm really focused, and I'm happy that I'm trying to carve out a space there.
Yeah, I think that's well put and a good point. So it's funny, we went on a nice long journey there, which I really liked. And it all stemmed, believe it or not, from Rug Radio and Decrypt. And I think the net there is just like, when groups consolidate, we're realizing that it turns from loose influencers behind the curtain and these rings and these Discord channels to businesses, right? And everything you read out there from news, from CoinDesk to Decrypt, you've got to take everything with a grain of salt, because there is an agenda behind each of those, and that's what we're here to uncover. So definitely follow us, definitely hit the like button and do all that. Leave us a review, do all that stuff, and join us and help us. If there's things you want to talk about, or if there's topics that are interesting to you or someone we should talk to, please let us know. That's how we got Dr. G on here to talk about AI and decentralization, which was a super cool episode. So just join us and talk to us and let us know what you like, because I'm sure what you like, if you're listening and you're sticking with us, then it's going to be as a group that we kind of all grow this honestly and transparently together.
Well said. I agree completely. And we appreciate all feedback at all times. And that's not just speak, like we're always thirsty for ideas and things to explore. And, we talk about looking at potentially developing tools or, things that we can that could help people and help the kind of movement moving forward. So we're in it for the long term. And again, trying to be just a little bit of a voice of nuance and kind of ask the question, is it really? I think that's a really important question these days when you get certain things that kind of infiltrate your thought track. It's like, yeah, but is it really? And that kind of helps to kind of give you a step back.
For sure. So the one other thing we wanted to share with you today, which is really interesting. So, like I said, everybody, we're all just in like this Bitcoin ETF holding pattern. But just how much, like, let's say 12 ETFs get approved, which I think the date was set to be like January 15th, 2024. So let's just say it happens in January. So 12 ETFs all at the same time are open for business. Now, obviously, hedge funds and some pension funds, especially pension funds, probably, and maybe retirement funds, will be slower to move and have to get approvals, and they might jump on the bandwagon. But, I cannot imagine in the US that the floodgates aren't going to open. Maybe not on all 12, but 12's a lot, but they're going to open. So how much Bitcoin are on the exchanges now? And you see FTX at the bottom there, obviously they don't matter, but so at the top you got Binance at 522,000 Bitcoin, you got Coinbase at 440,000, Bitfinex at 389, OKX at 132, Gemini, and on and on and on. The total Bitcoin out there right now is 1.83 million Bitcoin, which is 9.4% of the supply, which is a pretty healthy number, right? You almost got 10% of the supply that you and I, we can't buy it all because we can't afford it, but we can buy some right now. There's no shortage. But think about when these 12 funds, I assume some are pre-gobbling, just, obviously taking a little risk on, but have been pre-gobbling. The word was that BlackRock was doing it through miners, which is the best way to not change the price, right? Because the Bitcoin just came into existence, so it didn't really hit the market. It doesn't put a squeeze on the supply. But how do these guys even, Fidelity, BlackRock, over $1 trillion in holding? I don't know if Fidelity's at $1 trillion. BlackRock's well over $1 trillion, but these are just Goliath. So the amount of money now is, it's like it's going to make our current crypto whales look like minnows again. It'll make us just look like we're a little lichen, like, hey, little moss here, little Bitcoin.
Hi over here.
Yeah. Well, but the beauty is we got to front run this whole thing. So you've got 9.4% of Bitcoin, right? ETH has 13,247,000. Remember, ETH has a much bigger supply at 120 million, whereas Bitcoin, of course, is capped at 21 million with 19.4 million in circulating supply. Now, the other, whatever that is, 1.6 coming out in the next 100 years. So you've got 13.2 million ETH. That's about 11% of the supply. So a little more in Bitcoin, which is 9.4%. So My theory on this is that if there's even some demand here, especially when the hedge funds, like some of these hedge funds are going to jump in, and these, the Raymond James and some of these personal investment companies, because clients have been asking for it, they're gonna, I would just think the floodgates are going to open. And at some point, I don't know if there's enough to buy. I mean, that sounds like a lot of money, but that could go super quick. I mean, that's under $100 billion in Bitcoin. I mean, that in the big whale, that's nothing.
Yeah. And remember, last week we were talking about, Qatar alone is budgeting 500 billion potentially.
Allegedly.
I understand, but I'm just saying that
they're talking about it. They're talking about it.
Yeah. But my point is, we're just talking about the ETF side of it, and there's still all these other players that may get a little antsy and want to get involved. So it goes just looking at this, it takes you back to basic, the first day you hear about supply and demand, and you got to look at that. And I hate to make it that basic, but it really kind of is that basic. If the demand pumps like this and the supply is fixed, what happens? The price goes up.
Yeah. For sure. So, I mean, for both of these assets, for Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's not a ton out there on the exchanges. And if, we'll explain it to the folks who are listening and not watching, but if you look at the charts, we've got a good one here from CryptoQuant. So this is Bitcoin over the last 3 years. Look at the amount of so the black here is the price and the blue is how much is on the exchange. This is just the last year, but the amount on the exchange went from 2.7 million and now it's down to 2 million Bitcoins, right? So that's the 9.4% where we are now. Or what are we at? 1.8 now, actually. So to me, I mean, if you're listening, the supply in the last year goes down quite quickly. Now, if you look at Ethereum, it's even crazier. Now, obviously with staking, when you have staking, that stuff gets locked up. And, if someone's staking, it's obviously not on exchange. The amount there in the last 3 years has gone from 32 million-ish down to where we are now at about 14 million. And remember, these two companies, they're close in their numbers. So if it's not exact from what I said before, it's because CryptoQuant is actually including the Mt. Gox holdings, especially for Bitcoin. Why? And they're counting that as an exchange, which is silly because that money is locked up and is actually, once it unlocks, it's going to actually go to the people who got screwed for 10 years, holding it. So some of those people are going to be very rich and very, very happy. But the amount of supply in the last 3 years of Ethereum and Bitcoin has gone down considerably. And you're right. I'm being very US centric here because like Qatar, I mean, if they spend 500 billion, well, how do you spend 500 billion when the supply of Bitcoin right now is under 100 billion? You don't, but obviously the more you buy, the more supply and demand, the more price just squeezes up. So at some point, you can keep buying, the price will keep going up and you can get your 500 billion because you're going to be at 100, 200, 300, $400,000 and up per Bitcoin. I mean, so we'll see what kind of, being the biggest financial system in the world, we'll see what kind of pressure gets put on Bitcoin and eventually Ethereum when and if they get their ETF. But I suspect it's going to be a lot at first. It's going to get a lot of buzz and a lot of news. And then I think a lot of the laggards are going to jump on. You said something really interesting before that I want to circle back on. You keep thinking of Bitcoin, Ethereum. You kept saying people have to understand, like, now it's easier with the ETF. First, they have to understand that, but with Ethereum, they have to understand. And what you forget to realize is we're the early adopters. We're the ones who have to understand because the UX isn't baked in yet. All this, when the big chasm is crossed to the mainstream, a lot of this is going to be in retirement accounts or just basic trading accounts. it's going to be invisible to them. It only matters to you and the people in this ecosystem who are super into it and, either want to build in it or really just understand it and how money can be reinvented, reimagined. The mainstream, it's just like when you buy your taco, it's like you don't need on your receipt where the meat was sourced and, what kind of tomatoes are being used in the salsa. You just like that it tastes good, and has a little kick at the end. So I think I think it's going to be huge. And even if it's a slow, sluggish start, I feel like it's going to put pressure on the supply of Bitcoin. And I just can't imagine like pension funds not at least at some point, once the market moves to the mainstream, allocating 1 or 2% to it as simply another hedge along with gold.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that one of the things that we're not talking about enough, which is, pretty obvious, is nobody who's already owns Bitcoin or is holding Bitcoin is looking to sell it. So you got to factor that into the market and into the demand. And if there's X amount of people or X, you have the sailors, you have the other groups, you have the individual retailer. No one's like, oh, now's my time to dump Bitcoin. I think the only thing that maybe I would sell some Bitcoin for would maybe be an ordinal, but that's still within Bitcoin to a degree. You know what I mean?
Now
So I just don't see it. I don't think.
Are we both going NodeMonkeys?
I don't know how much they're going to cost, so I'll have to check the purse. But from a conceptual perspective, yes. And
okay.
but as I say, that's the other part on this. You look at a potential hockey stick of the, demand, and then you have to add. Nobody's going to be like, oh yeah, I'll just sell mine for market. Like everyone's in it for the long term. I would think that's already adopted it and is holding it. It's not on exchanges as we've shown. And I just don't see a lot of people being like, yeah, now's my time to dump it. Maybe a little profit taking here or there, but it goes against the whole hold mentality of Bitcoin.
Well, it goes against the whole hold mentality. And once the floodgates open, it's not like all the demand is going to be met in 2 days. Like to me, it's either going to be a super fast, then a slower squeeze, or a super slow, then a gradual. But at some point, people are going to see like, when is the mainstream coming in? They're not, when the first people, when the new bakery finally opens its doors and the first 3 people come screaming in with their money, the person's not like, okay, I want to sell my interest in this bakery right now. You're going to wait and see how many customers you get and all that stuff. And I think with all the regulation and, with just all the financial entities, both public and private, and companies, and like you said, globally, and states and sovereigns, like just to me seems like, why wouldn't everybody carry at least some? And that to me says hold long term for everybody who got in early now and who's holding. Not financial advice, but
not financial advice,
but it's advice for Chicago.
Yeah, and it's a complete perspective change. So once you start going into that bigger thought and picture of, we're looking, I think I read that it was between January 8th and 10th when that announcement's going to actually come down because of how the week falls and blah, 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 blah. Hopefully that can be a point where maybe it'll get everybody more on the same page and realizing that we're rooting for an entire change of, all the values that were so exciting and so intriguing about this space. And we get past this, what the bulk of this show was really about was kind of this, strategization, and that's not a word, but, this businessification and business development of the different, projects and things. And we can sit back and look at it and be like, okay, people are coming in, people are going to use this, and we may actually see some of the changes that we've been rooting for. So that's kind of how I hope this goes. And then, I think everyone, even if you're a big ETH maxi, I think you're rooting for the bit ETF to go well, so it's kind of like, it kind of gets everybody, pulling on the same side of the rope. And I think that'll be really kind of gratifying and positive to see.
Yeah, for sure. A rising tide in this case will definitely lift all boats. And, Google right on time is now coming in, and I guess they've got regulators everywhere on them too, but they are clearing BTC ETF advertising in January because obviously even the people there think that that's imminent. That's a pretty bullish sign to me. But the fact they haven't allowed crypto advertising in years, and now they're allowing, it sounds like, at least a portion of that to thaw. Because, if you can't advertise on Google, I mean, what are they, 78,
Yeah.
80, 90% of the search market? I mean, that too will open up the floodgates yet again, and probably open up the floodgates to some scams. So hopefully they got controls in place to try and keep a lot of those away, because there are a lot.
Yeah. And that's kind of the good news, right? Is that it's not, I don't think any of these larger organizations are going to get caught flat-footed on this. There's been plenty of time to develop your time and strategy. And I'm sure, the Van X and the, Fidelities, it's not like, they're like it's going to get approved. They're going to be like, okay, now what do we do? So, things, the groundwork's been laid, and let's hope that there's decent execution, and that, we can let as many people get involved and everyone can benefit. So it's it's an exciting time. It's almost like you want the countdown clock to, January 10th to start kicking in. We're sitting here mid-December, so it really is imminent. We're probably about 3-4 episodes away from actually talking about if this thing comes to life, and see kind of how a landscape could change, because if it doesn't, I don't know what that's going to do to the air and the sales as well. So we really gotta pay attention and be poised and ready to go.
Yeah, I think there'll definitely be some sell pressure there, but
but that's an opportunity.
It is an opportunity. To me, in the long run, the ETF feels inevitable. Remember, you careful what you wish for. Then you've got the big whales all of a sudden now playing that game, and Bitcoin, they're trading on paper. So, as long as we can hold the underlying and have our own hardware wallets and secure that stuff, like, sign me up.
It does kind of scare me though, hearing, institutional investors trying to position it. And, some of me does fear, what that narrative turns into, and how they, totally commodify it, and we look at it from that side. So that'll be something I think we should keep an eye on too. And, I do think the base has been laid for, the understanding of how it should work and how it goes. And that's kind of the immutable thing that's so beautiful about the, Bitcoin from the jump. Right. But I don't want it to get too icky with like fund managers, telling me why they think this is the move. And it's like, dude, that's good. That's good. Just, I'm going to hold. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see. So that's what we'll talk about on this show for sure. So, also lots of stuff, like I said, we tie threads together from old shows to new shows, and, so many stories are interrelated. And I think that's where a lot of, folks out there fall short. They just, they talk about this story, then this story, this is the news. And it's just like, it's parroting. And we all know that the smart folks in the space know that all of this stuff is kind of a dance that's interwoven with each other. As such, we follow up with stories that we've already covered, and kind of what's going on with them now. So Disco, I'll throw out the first one if we don't have any more kind of in the main news section.
No, I think we've covered the up to date, and I think there's a few that we should touch on that have kind of resurfaced with some interesting new data points, so to speak.
For sure. So the first one is, we did a whole show on Nouns. And for those of you who don't know or can't see, Nouns are a fully on-chain Ethereum NFT, but it's really so much more than that. They're a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, where holding one of these Nouns tokens, and basically every noun has the Nouns glasses, which were in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. So they're getting their name out there, but there's tiger heads, coat hanger heads, curling stone heads, ship heads, you name it, there's a head for that. And they're very pixelated because they're all totally compacted on the Ethereum chain. What's been going on is a lot of early people, this has been going on for 2.5 years now, but a lot of early buyers who paid sometimes 50, 100 plus ETH for some of these nouns were kind of upset that that they weren't maybe realizing more value, or they weren't investing in more stuff. But for whatever reason, a lot of nouns have bailed in 3 different forks. So, we can look at the forks. I'll show you in a second, but there's been 3 forks now. And since we last did it, we covered fork 0 and fork 1. Everything in crypto just starts with a 0. Just get used to it. So 0 is always 1 and 1's always 2. But so there was 2 forks, fork 0 and fork 1. Now on November 16th, what was that, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, very silently, it didn't get much buzz because there's so much hype on the bull market now. This one just didn't even hit my timeline until I just went on there. I'm like, wait a second, was there another fork? So the arbitrageurs are buying Nouns. There's a huge Nouns treasury. So what these folks are doing is they're arbitraging and buying as many Nouns as they can, and then they're forking. So look at this. So notice all these Nouns are going for like in the 20s, 21, 20, 20, 20, 20, 18, 22, 21. So what the ARBs are doing, this was November 12th, 13th. So look at this. We go to the 13th. Remember, November 16th was when the big fork happened. So there's the 16th, the 17th. Remember, you can still get in because it was proposed on that day. We're at 23, 20. And then all of a sudden you see it dip to like 15, 16. So now what these folks did,
that's like November, late teens in November. So like November 18 or so, you're starting to see it move down from the higher rate.
Yep. So now we're November 27th, 28th. Now we're at 11, November 30th, December 1st, we're at 12, December 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 11, 12, 12, 12 and a half, 11 and a half, 12, 10. So the numbers are teeny, and that's because this fork, every time you get enough Nouns to fork, then you are taking the treasury. So think about this. That group of 53 Nouns right there they were paying about 20 ETH on average, maybe 21 ETH, but they're looking at the entire treasury of Nouns, which used to be, I believe when you and I first looked at this was like 24 to 30,000 ETH. It was a ton of ETH. It's down to 8,000 now. So each time these Nouns fork, remember, all these other people might have been paying 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 ETH for these. These guys the new guys are paying 20. Well, guess what? However many Nouns there are, they get that cut of the entire treasury. It's almost like, you could call it the great experiment, or you could call it a glitch, but the arbors are trying to figure out. So they probably netted like 24, 25, 26 ETH. So they probably all netted like plus 2 or 3 ETH to make this arbitrage play. Well, it's great for them, and it's an interesting experiment for us not owning Nouns. But if you own a Noun, your treasury, the goal of Nouns is to propagate Nouns and make it the biggest global brand out there, which is a very adventurous and ambitious cause, right?
And costly. It's not easy to launch a potential lifestyle brand along the lines of a Nike or, and that's where that's their goal, is to become a household name across the world. So, you're going to need a pretty big purse to be able to get your stuff placed in front of the right people.
Yep. So these 53 Nouns forked yet again. And so those Nouns get returned to the main treasury. There's also a second set of Nouns that go with the Noun fork too, and they get to take their share of the treasury. So now you saw roughly a couple days after this fork, when this passed, now we're at 10 to 12 ETH. So they're probably thinking they can net like 15. You can imagine that this is causing some consternation. So it's a race. It's a slow race to zero. But the actual core believers, and I don't hold any Nouns now, but I definitely plan to. And I like the concept of this whole thing, and I will definitely own a Noun at some point. Not financial advice, but it's interesting. So the Nouns actually came up with a proposal to raise the fork threshold. The fork threshold was 10%. So all you needed, remember, one Noun comes into existence every day. It's bid on by the general market. Well, right now the general market is arbitrageurs. They're trying to get to 10% of the threshold of Nouns, and then they can vote. All they need is the 10% of Nouns to get out, and then they take that treasury more than they paid in to get out. So now the Nouns just passed to raise the fork threshold to 30%. So now you need 30% more 30% of the nouns of the circulating supply in the main group have to vote to get out. So as you can see, it is going to, they're trying to make it harder, but the arbitrageurs, as you can see, are still playing the game. They're just going to have to play it arguably 3 times as long to get their net profit of ETH. And if someone's got a lot of money, they might buy 10 or 12 of these things. They have to wait for 70 to get minted, or 70 days, but they'll get maybe 2 or 3 ETH times however many nouns they had. So the game keeps continuing to be played. What Nouns is also doing is, for the proposals that come in, they're really trying to find good proposals. So if you have a good idea for Nouns and how to propagate it out there, and I've got a good one, I think, that I'll share later on this show, but if they're going to try and spend the money to get it out there, because the more they spend, the more the arbitrageurs are like, wait a second, we can't predict how much money is going to be in there. So there's this cat and mouse game going on right now of, hey, we're going to spend the money, and now it takes 30%, and they're trying to limit them. I mean, I would argue at some point, I don't know what that number is. Maybe it's 5 ETH, maybe it's 4 ETH, maybe it's 7 ETH, but at some point, I would assume we may get to a number where it's not worth it for the arbitrageurs anymore, and then the people who actually want to be a part of Nouns can get in. So, we're entering a bull market. I assume more people want to get in on Nouns, but there's this weird balancing act. So the Nouns, the verbs, who are like kind of the brain trust and the Oz behind the curtain, had a whole write-up of the kind of game theory behind all this. But I will say, as a bystander, this has been fascinating to watch, because DAOs, a DAO can work, but not all DAOs are fully proven. And this is either a feature or a bug. If I was an early investor, it would have been a bug, because I'd have been super bummed, because if I had stuck around, you're just watching your treasury deplete, and the value of your share of the treasury. Remember, the first fork, I think it was 36 to 38. Then it went down to like 28, 29. Now we saw it was 22. Now it sounds like it's going to be like 12 or 13. Like, you're just watching it go down. At some point, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to jump ship, and maybe I'll just get another one in, or get a second fork one for pennies on the dollar. So it's
fascinating. And I was, it was enlightening just to, sit through and be a part of the conversation with Brennan when we were talking about it. And, as you say, like, this is a real time experiment on the functionality of DAOs, and looking at the structure and the potential vulnerabilities and where it can go. And if you aren't, a holder, and you're not hurt by that, you're right. You're really watching the evolution of something. And if I recall, with the Nouns, other people could use kind of their structure for other, organizations. So it really was, this development of a novel concept of a new way of governance, and to see kind of, it almost feels like the arbitrageurs are like, they snuck in the gate, and we're going to see, how much they can do and how much they can influence it. And,
right.
You're really looking at a potential new, the governance aspect of DAOs can be fascinating. And I think they've always been, at the forefront of trying to understand how this can be leveraged and utilized in a really game-changing way. So yeah, that's remarkable.
Yeah. So we'll as this unfolds, we'll see. I mean, it looks like there's probably going to be a fork 3 and a fork 4, but now the Nouns are being more strategic in how they approach it, which is super cool. So what other things we want to follow up on Disco for the?
The only other thing I was thinking maybe I'd ask you about a little bit is just to check in on, I know we talked about, the exit, or the potential exit strategy of, we did the whole show, or the deep dive about, comparing solo staking, Lido and Rocket Pool. And you kind of walked us through your entrance into, running a node from Rocket Pool. And, I was curious just kind of where things are at from that side of things.
Yep. Good question. So I staked in Rocket Pool with 8 ETH. And drove the train, and 24 ETH stacked on with me. So I was getting 14% of the staking rewards by being the validator, right? So it was a
Right.
very interesting concept, and I do love it, but we did talk about the risks of that show, and it's funny, I think I jumped in almost a little too quickly to Rocket Pool. I don't regret it, but so I exited the validator after our show last week. I exited the validator to Rocket Pool, and it took basically for the beacon chain to recognize the exit. I think it took about a day and a half. It said exiting, and then it exited in about a day and a half. And then it took another 256 blocks, or about 27 hours, where it was withdrawable. What is very difficult, and Rocket Pool actually has decent documentation, but it doesn't explain very well when it's, because basically in Rocket Pool they're doing all these smart contracts behind the scenes, because remember, you have to stake 2.5 ETH worth of Rocket Pool, which the price of Rocket Pool now is down pretty, not bad, but I think it's like 25, 26. And so you have to convert your Rocket Pool to ETH, or ETH to Rocket Pool. You have to stake that. You have to stake your 8 ETH to get your 14%. And I did the smoothing pool too, and just the returns, it didn't seem worth it to me. But I'm glad I did it. And I don't have my money out yet, because I'm checking to make sure that it says exited, and I waited the time where it is withdrawable. But the way that they explain it to then getting it out, what I understand is basically, there's over 1 million validators now, and it basically just creates a bookmark every block, like, okay, this many validators, if they're asking for rewards, whether it's just your validator rewards or getting all your money out and closing the validator down, those are treated the same. And it just goes through like 1 to 100,000, and then it's like, okay, stop. It creates a bookmark, and then it does it again, and then it just starts over again. So right now I'm not seeing the 8 ETH, or I'm not sure if I'm reading it right. So I'm just waiting a week to make sure that thing cycled through. I think I could take it out now, but like I said, between having my own solo validator and running this Rocket Pool node, the Discord group for Rocket Pool was almost egging a little, and I don't think they're ready for prime time. Like, if they're basically saying, if you're not doing command line stuff, like, we don't want you. That's kind of what I got. And I can do the terminal command line stuff, but I have an interface through DAppNode to do it. And the fact that they were just like, oh, you're one of those DAppNode guys, like, beat it. It doesn't make me want to stake Rocket Pool. And honestly, the extra rewards, I just don't think are worth it. And I think the one thing I'd want to pass on to everybody is, when you're in a bull market and you're staking like a second layer like this, where you're doing smart contracts on top of the staking, like my solo stakers right now in a bull market, if I get it out, I can get it out, within that 1 or 2 day period. It's no big deal, because there's no one queue to get out. But the more you stack on top of that, like a Rocket Pool or a Lido, if the market tanks or something glitches, like one of the consensus layers or something, and everyone's racing to get out at the same time, if you're late, that building's on fire, like, you may get burned, and your Rocket Pool may unpeg from ETH. Like, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. The beauty of smart contracts and Ethereum and the whole crypto ecosystem, it will eventually unwind, but you may be last out, and you may get burned with like a depeg or be a slow one out. Even if it doesn't depeg, the price of the underlying asset might go down so much you simply can't get out of it to get back in cash or to get back in Bitcoin. Like, if there's a fire in the building, you're just one more step removed. I can't even get the Rocket Pool out for 28 days, because they do these big 28-day cycles. So just everything you do and put in, there are definitely rewards, but the more rewards you get, just know that there's underlying risks with time, and that 1, 2, or 28 days could be what like makes you lose half your ETH or make stuff get screwed up entirely. So,
well, I know that, we kind of went through the evaluation and the exploration of the different options. And, that was what really stuck out, from watching and listening to kind of your experience was like, well, why do I have to buy Rocket Pool? Like, and like they're calling it ETH, but it's not, it's like 2.4
Right.
or whatever. It's like, well, really just tell me that I have to buy this much Rocket Pool. And what's kind of, a word to the wise, I guess, out of this is you couldn't have imagined any of the things that you're dealing with. Like they weren't positioned as any potential situations through looking at the website and setting it up.
Right. They're just like, oh, and then
Well,
just do this. And then there's basically one line of code to unstake. And I did that and nothing happened at first. And then I saw it exiting. I'm like, oh, okay, it worked. I didn't even get a confirmation on that. It felt very sketchy. And like I said, I haven't gotten my ETH back yet, but I'm confident that I will. I'm just being extra cautious and waiting. But in waiting, thank goodness I'm in a bull market and not in a market where I actually like am desperate or need it, or just don't, I see everything tanking and, I want to get out first. So, cause I want to get out of that rocket pool and
reposition.
Yeah. And I had to put in 2.4, 2.5 ETHs worth of rocket pool. Now that the conversion rates are a little lower, rocket pools go down a little, I'll probably get 2 ETH back. And, obviously it's a good lesson learned. And like you said, until I went through that with the staking, I wouldn't have known that there was these extra layers to get out on top of the ETH staking. I assume there were, but yeah, it's not necessarily positioned that way. And I think, don't get me wrong, I think Rocket Pool is an interesting, great way to do it. But I guess being a solo staker, I'd much rather have an Ethereum staking node that I control and I can get in and out of. And there's risks with that too, but it's, the reward is less, but the risk, in my opinion, is far less because I'm directly hooking in, to the main chain. So,
and true or false, the reception, like when you're going into the community of the solo stakers, appeared to be a little warmer than what you got the other way. So then you're kind of feeling like you're walking home late at night alone, when you're trying to withdraw or, exit and get the right answers and get guidance. Like,
yeah, I would say so. The DApp node actually makes its own machines. They have software that I installed on a NUC, like a simple Linux box, but they also have their own like pre-built boxes. So a lot of their Discord channel is more about that and what's launched, but they are good folks. It's not the most active Discord channel I've ever seen, but they were somewhat helpful. I wouldn't say it was coming home, but at least it was like they'll help you on that side. But their integration with Rocket Pool is still it's literally version 1.0, and I'm sure there's more updates to make it more clear. I probably did it a little earlier than I should have, but I was curious and I'd consider doing Rocket Pool again, but I don't know. I think there's other places. Well, if I can build another validator, build up to 32 ETH, if I have 6 to 8 to 10 ETH, I can always stake in Lido, which comes with its own risks, but I can unstake my ETH and Lido faster. I'm only getting 4% as opposed to maybe like, we'll call it 6% with Rocket Pool because you get the 14% on the other folks. But, it's also less headache, but so I need to figure out with a less than 30, if I want to keep building validators kind of as my long-term annuity of getting ETH every week like I am now, what's that strategy when you have from 2 to 32 ETH before you set up your next validator?
Just buy NFTs.
Yeah, I mean, it's worked for me in some ways and it's completely screwed me in others, but no regrets, but it's been fun.
All right. Well, I think that was good follow-up from the other shows. It is interesting how, things come back. And I think that, at Chicago, I think you made a really good point that I want to hold us to, circling back to things that we covered as opposed to just punch listing, news items of the week and not trying to, kind of put the different ingredients into the stew so that we're building something, at the end of it where it all kind of feeds upon itself and we can get some exponential knowledge. So I think that's valuable, at least from my perspective, to, even go back and look at the nouns, because when we first sat down, I was more just onboarded into the concept overall and was kind of just, whoa, wow, you know,
I threw you into that one. I'm like, hey, we have another show in 4 hours and it's on nouns. We're like, awesome. What are nouns?
Yeah, nouns are kind of a heady concept to wrap your head around in the beginning.
But now, like
it's
with
great.
this follow up, you're like, okay, like I see this pattern. I see how the arbitrage, like you see how these bigger systems work. And, you know, we're on the ground floor. DAOs haven't even remotely been solved. And you know, we get to be on the ground floor to see how these things work, which is super cool. Because at some point, you know, DAOs that are more social structures, they're going to figure out the best combo of company / DAO. And for more automated ones, I think that's easier to figure out, where DAO just, you know, runs contract and sends funds to X number of wallets. That's obviously the easiest use of a DAO, but it's going to make an impact. We're kind of on the front lines of the experimentation how, and Nouns, in my opinion, is by far one of the best ones doing it, and really not being afraid to tinker, not only not being afraid to tinker, but also not being afraid. Like they easily could have, especially with the Nounders, with how many they hold, they could have been like, no, we're locking the movie theater doors and, you know, nobody can get out because that treasury is too big and we want to spend it on Nouns. Well, then the vote and everything, like then you weren't decentralized in the first place. And they took a very moral high ground there. And I respect them for that. I mean, you know, obviously it angered a lot of people, but those people were able to get out. A lot of them obviously lost a lot of ETH, but some didn't. And some might have paid 30 or 40 ETH and they got out, kind of broke even. We're like, okay, that was a good experiment, but this is too wealthy of a game for me right now. And I want to get my ETH back. So it's fascinating to be on the 50-yard line of this.
Yeah. So again, we sit down, we start talking, and before we know it, much time has passed through the old hourglass, and we covered quite a bit. And I really, you know, I thought it was a interesting conversation. I think I'm excited for the next show and what comes up. So usually we try to work in, you know, just kind of not really a moment of gratitude, but a moment just to kind of recognize, you know, something good that's going on in the world. With a lot of these headlines out there, it's kind of hard to always, you know, zoom back and really look at the positive things in life. So I don't know if Chicago, if you have anything you wanted to kind of touch on to kind of wrap up the show.
Yeah, I got a couple, but I'll just pick one of them. I can't remember what I did last week, but this week I would say, if I said persistence last week, it's still persistence this week. One of my children went out for a sport and, you know, has only really started playing it recently. And just to like, and there's only an A team, only 12 make it out of 50 kids. And, you know, I was like, well, how did it go? And she's like, you know, I did my best and I had fun, Dad. And you know, and there's a couple more days of it. And, but that's all you can do. And that's all you can ask in life. Like, just keep getting up and, you know, keep moving forward, and you know, even when you don't feel like it, just keep trying, because, you know, doors will open and your perspective in life, I think, will change if you keep not moving to keep yourself so busy you don't smell the roses, but to keep moving, to keep learning and keep being curious, and just to keep trying stuff and to putting it in perspective. And I think kids are so good at doing that for all of us, just being like, oh yeah, it was cool. Like, I may make a kid, I may not. There's kids who are better than me, but you know, I'm trying my best and it was fun to try out, and we'll see what happens. And if I don't make it, I'm going to go play in that rec league again, you know, at the Park District. I'm like, cool, that's all you can ask for. And if at worst you get a new sport under your belt when you're older and you can just like get activity and have fun and get some sun playing beach volleyball or indoor volleyball or whatever, then hats off to you. You're on your way to kind of being a self-contained, content human being. So huzzah.
I love it. Like I completely, I see the beauty in that. And, you know, if you don't, you end up surprising yourself a lot. And I think that you end up, you know, the universe ends up surprising you in good ways as well. So,
Agreed.
I'm gonna do a little hard fork here and go into a disclaimer saying that this show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing is purposed to be financial advice. We encourage you to do your own research and to make sure that you don't get in a position where you're over your skis on any of these thoughts or investments, and just keep exploring. And until next week, we'll be doing the same. So I appreciate it. And this is Disco signing off.
And Chicago signing off. Take care, everybody, and like it, rate it, do all that stuff.
Yes,
and thanks for being with us. Take care.
Bye-bye.